What's going on, everybody? This is Gary B. Jr., and today we're going to talk about what is the best camera that you can get on a budget. Or not the best camera, but the things to look for the best camera when you're on a budget and you're a content creator. All right. Now, this is very different than shooting a live event. This is very different than cinematic shooting because as a content creator, one of the most important things is a workflow that produces quickly. All right. And so to me, what that means is you want to have preset profiles, color profiles, right? So you don't need to have or shoot in a log format or anything like that. You can shoot in standard or natural or whatever your favorite look or profile is in your camera, and that should be more than enough. For what you're shooting it for in terms of shooting it for social media, shooting it even for YouTube long form videos like this, right? The other thing to keep in mind that I would say is important is making sure that your camera has some type of flip out screen, all right, or flip up. Some cameras have a flip up screen. For a content creator, you want to be able to see what you look like to make sure you're in focus, make sure you're framed right in the shot, and most often than not, you're not going to need a big director's monitor or something like that if you're an individual content creator. Now, if you've got your own studio and things like that, it'll be more almost like a cinematic production or something like that, where you're going to have a lot more equipment, a lot more cords, cables, a lot more bigger, devices, microphones, and all that kind of stuff. But as an individual, this is from the standpoint of an individual content creator looking to create content and output it fairly quickly, fairly easily, right? So audio is a big deal. Okay, so audio as a content creator, you can get away with just having a boom mic or a little small boom mic on your camera and talk directly into the camera because you're often not going to be very far from your camera. And those microphones are great when you're not very far from them, right? The further you get from the camera, the harder it becomes to get good quality audio. All right. Now, what I will say as well is that you can use a lapel as a microphone that's going to be directly connected to your person, your body, and the receiver, a wireless receiver, will be on the camera, and you can get that distance away from the camera. A lot of people go outside and they'll shoot, 10 yards away from their camera because they want to take in the full scene. That's great. A wireless microphone is going to be best. Do not try to do that with a boom microphone, please. All right, the audio will be unacceptable. Let's just put it that way. All right. The other thing that I would say that's important for you as a content creator when it comes to creating content is just consider at least a USB-C connection from the camera to the computer where you can actually stream directly into your computer from the camera without it interfering, right? You don't necessarily need to have a video capture card if your camera can support that. Now, if you're looking to get an older camera, then you're going to just need some type of HDMI output. It can be micro, it can be mini, it can be full size HDMI. It doesn't matter. Typically, because your camera's going to be standing still and it's going to be on your desk or something like that, and you're going to plug it into a capture card. There's still room for failure, but as a content creator, you can just retake and do it again if it didn't record properly, right? So those things are less important for you as a content creator. The other thing I would say that's important for you as a content creator when it comes to picking the right camera. We talked about the flip up screen or flip out screen. We talked about getting a good audio and then using the picture profiles that are in your camera. The next thing I would say is the lens choice that you have, right? So I wouldn't recommend being a content creator with some type of camcorder, but you can use an action cam. And the thing about the lens choice I was going to say, this likened unto an action cam, is you want to have some type of wide angle lens, all right? And I say wide angle, I would say anything less than 35 millimeters would be a good wide angle lens, preferably 24. Maybe even smaller than that, right? You can get you a 17 millimeter or something like that. I don't know, whatever it is that's less than 35 millimeters, that would be considered to me a good wide angle lens that you can use because that way you can hand hold it fairly decently. And then you can also set it down and have a wider scope, have that wider field of view without having to be super far from your camera. And then as you use it more, you might decide, okay, I do want to get a camera with a different type of lens, or I want to get a camera that has a higher aperture lens or higher quality camera lens, I'm sorry, that has a better aperture with it, right? Because to me, as a content creator, background blur is not that important, but for some of us, it can be. But I would say more important than background blur is lighting. If you're going to be in a space, light it well. Okay, and this is why you're not going to hear me talk a lot about the recording quality of the camera, because that's not that important as a content creator. It can shoot in HD, it can shoot in 4K. It doesn't matter as far as I'm concerned. That's probably the least important thing for any type of creator in terms of whether your camera can shoot in 4K or 6K or 8K or whatever it is. However, if you're looking at latest and greatest cameras, they'll market and pitch that and push that as if it's very important. And to be honest with you, what it'll do is it'll create probably more of a cumbersome workflow than it does a streamlined workflow, because now your files are larger. You got to get more hard drives to store that stuff and save it and all that kind of stuff. Whereas if you're recording in HD, you can upscale it to be 4K if you want to, right? I've done that many times. If you're recording in 4K, you can do more with cropping and things like that in post-production. But the truth is, that just takes more time, right? So you want to be mindful. If you're going to shoot in 4K, that's great, and you plan to crop in and do all these different things and change the angle of it and do some some jump cuts and things like that. That's great, but doesn't matter about the recording quality in terms of HD, 4K. The higher that you want, the better, in terms of it'll just give you a better quality, sharper image. But to be honest, you're usually just shooting your face. So you don't want to be super sharp, because maybe there's a pimple that pops up this day, or maybe there's whatever happens or whatever's going on with your face, your body, whatever it is, you may not need it to be super sharp in terms of it being the most flattering. Okay. I think Canon's cameras are renowned for having that, especially the older cameras, the cinema cameras especially, for having a good soft image that's not too soft, but it's soft enough to where it's flattering to the face and the skin tones and the skins of the individual that is shown on the camera. No matter how far, how close they are, no matter what lens you use, the skins weren't, the skin on the actual person was not so sharp that you could see the pores and all that kind of stuff in their face. It wasn't high detail with it, and that's usually very flattering for anybody. And so that means that you got to consider that based on what you want to do in terms of, do you plan to do a lot of makeup? And if not, then okay, then maybe you don't need a super sharp Sony camera that has unbelievable autofocus, because everything's going to be super sharp, and you may not like the way it looks on your skin, and you're going to end up having to do a lot of work editing that out, rather than just getting a camera that supports it the way you like it. All right. Portability is important as a content creator. So the size of your camera, usually the smaller it is, the better. All right. Especially if you're doing a lot of handheld stuff, you're trying to vlog or something like that. The smaller the lens, the smaller the camera, the easier it'll be. That's why you see people running around with those action cams like the Osmo or even the GoPros in the past were pretty popular for that. They're just easy to hand hold. Usually you get some type of tripod, a mini tripod, a gorilla pod back in the day. Those things were used quite a bit to hand hold, and it gives you a little bit of distance and extends your arm reach so you can be more in the scene and capture more of the scene behind you as well. So those are things I would recommend are most important when I think about being a content creator and wanting to create content and trying to pick the right gear. All right. When it comes to those things, if you can find a camera or solution that meets those needs, right, that accomplish those goals, you'll be well on your way to creating some great content as a content creator. All right. Have a great rest of the day. I'm Gary B. Jr.